Hi, I'm Shannon McDougall, founder of softballtutor.com. Let's talk about controllables in softball. One of the most frustrating things in softball is when things are not working your way and you feel like there's nothing you can do to change it. Umpires' calls or the opponents can be the perceived cause of distraction and decreased performance in almost any sport. The key to dealing with this distraction and frustration is knowing what you have control over and taking that control, or making sure that you don't get wrapped up in what you don't have control over. Opponents. Opponents are something that we do and don't have control over. We can control to a degree their choice in reaction and actions in a sport like tennis, where you return the ball to a specific location, causing them to move to that location and choosing their swing based on that location. The next part of that action is not in your control. How they actually respond to that return as far as location and topspin is now something that you respond to based on how they're attempting to control your action. In a fast-moving sport like basketball, hockey, rugby, or soccer, you don't have any time to choose how you're going to influence your opponent's actions or reactions, except that you're trying to do the opposite of what they're attempting to make you do. In a sport like gymnastics, you have total control of your performance because it's not dependent on the actions or reactions of your opponents. The final score you receive depends on your performance only, and the outcome of the event will depend on the performance of your opponents as well, which you don't have control over. In softball or football, you and your team have some control of the number of runs or points that you score, and this is the same as an individual sport. That being said, you need to be able to control your opponent's number of runs or score by your reactions to their actions. It's kind of complicated at first, but once you understand it, everything will make sense. Umpires. No one ever has control over how an umpire calls a game. The only control you have is whether you cause obstruction or hit the ball into foul territory or throw a ball out of play. Umpires are a common frustration for many, but the sooner that you can realize your lack of control over how they view the game, the less frustration you'll experience. Umpires come from their own backgrounds with their own stresses and levels of experience. All of these things will have an effect on how they call a game. Use your mental training skills to focus and refocus when you're feeling frustrated by a call or a missed call by an umpire. Spectators. How many times have you heard comments from spectators that are disrespectful to someone on your team or another team, and even towards you? Next time you're at a softball game, notice the spectators and imagine how you would react if you were a player on one of those teams. How do you think the actions would be distracting? How can you use mental training skills to keep your emotional control in such a situation? Coaches. Executing skills and worrying about what the coach is thinking can actually be more of a distraction than a help. By worrying about the coach, your performance will suffer because of anxiety and stress. You can't control what your coach is thinking, and to try to control them will take away from your enjoyment and will even add stress and anxiety if you worry about whether you'll be playing in the next game or not. Teammates. We can't have control over what our teammates do or how they perform. There's times when you do have an effect if you're involved in their skills, such as if you throw a ball to them, or if you're the first base player who needs to catch the ball that your teammate just threw a little off target. It's important to know the level of control you have, if any, so that you can prevent any unnecessary stresses. Environment. You have no control over your sport environment unless you're the one who develops and builds it. The best way to approach this lack of control is to prepare for competing in that environment. For example, if you're playing at your home field, you're already familiar. If you're going to an away tournament, do what you can to familiarize yourself with it. Be aware of the weather that might be expected for the tournament, and if possible, practice in the weather to be familiar with it. For safety purposes, don't practice without taking the necessary safety precautions. Sport equipment. Your access to quality equipment is dependent on your budget or the budget of the team or the association you're competing in. It's critical that you realize the potential of your equipment and learn to compete within those parameters. For example, you might not have expensive bats, but that doesn't mean that you're not capable of playing well. Use what you have and play the game instead of the equipment. You. Yes, you are a controllable. How you approach your training and competition is going to have the biggest effect on how you improve as a player and enjoy your experience. This is something harder to control than things outside of you that you think you have control over. This sometimes makes you the last thing to be considered when the frustration begins. Use the activities that you've been learning to this point to refocus and reclaim the things you have control over. By being as prepared as you can and planning as much as you can minimize how your environment might affect you negatively. Awareness and practice with controllables is the key to success. Being honest and then taking responsibility for what you have control over, such as your own performance skills and your conduct. Your physical, technical, and mental training skills can only be improved if you make a decision to improve them. By using the skills you've learned in this application, you can now plan your own destiny within your abilities. As you complete the activities, think of actual situations where you felt you did or didn't have control over the topic being discussed. Talk with others and observe what happens in your softball environment. It's when the outcome is on the line that people usually have a hard time with controllables. Take every opportunity to practice this skill and use it in your daily life as well. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions about the application or your progress, be sure to contact me at coach@softballtutor.com.